Hello, this is Krista here today again with ya. And today I want to continue talking about narcissistic abuse, which is what I've been learning a lot about lately. And I kind of wanted to keep the topic today on cognitive dissonance, one I've been learning a lot about this morning. I like the Chris Godina's videos. I'm getting kind of back more into her right now as I'm recuperating with finally all of my bad teeth out in the front of my mouth. As you can see, I lost all these teeth due to methamphetamine abuse. Well, I'm sure it's probably been more than 2 years now. It's probably more like going on 3. So, if you're new to my videos, yes, I was on drugs with another boyfriend of mine. Kind of did the party scene on the weekends, and when I was a stripper in the club for 7 years, I did drinking too, and just kind of was in kind of a party haze with these more substance abusing types of men, and also not only were they just substance abusers, but they were also narcissists, sometimes more extreme cases of psychopathy and sociopathy. Okay, so I do want to state that I do come from a narcissist family, and I've talked about that before in quite a few of my videos. And usually what leads a person to domestic abuse and narcissistic abuse is that usually they originate from a family that was also narcissistic, where the cycle played out, and that is they learned to be the victim very young. And now is the time when we can start educating and learning about what really has happened and took place, and how we can further and grow and heal it presently and into our future. I know a lot of times it does taking us as victims to come to the point where we can no longer want it anymore in our lives. We just completely had it. We can't take anymore. A lot of times it gets to the point where maybe that narcissist has come into your life, separated you from your family, friends, or even your very own children, like that happened to me. And have just devastated you, maybe financially, taken things from you, like maybe a house or whatever it was, had just left you completely devastated, and you need some help with understanding and just wanting a better life in general. A lot of times it does take us to get to that point of rock bottom, not only if maybe you were a drug addict or alcoholic, or even if you were a codependent, trying to take care of that alcoholic man in your life, or that chronic pothead or opiate user or whatever it was. Even if you try to do those things with them, and that finally, you're getting help for yourself, like I am, and and maybe the reason that you did do those drugs was so you could numb yourself from that nagging pain that was always there, in your life, that you could not get past, and that was just the only desperate way that you had to use to kind of put like a band-aid over that without ever really healing that deep core pain inside, usually that happened to us in childhood. And that is why we get these abusive mother or father type figures to be in relationships with presently. So, all in all said, I did want to focus on cognitive dissonance. I just listened to some really good stuff about this area and how devastating that it can be. And cognitive dissonance is kind of how the state that we come into, like why, and that's a large reason why we cannot leave the abusers. Oftentimes it takes at least up to 7 times of leaving that abusive partner before we can really truly get away from that person for good. That's quite a few times, and there is a reason for that. Cognitive dissonance, also like trauma bonding is another big one, where they will abuse you so extremely, like just damaging you emotionally, mentally, physically, or spiritually, to the point where you can be like traumatically bonded to that person. And of course, when we fall into that total victim helplessness, so beaten down that we actually can give up hope that there is ever a real chance of leaving. There was quite a long time ago, there was a bank robbery done where these people were taken hostage at gunpoint, and later on, when they finally did end up getting busted and got out of jail, one of the people that were the victims inside of the bank actually took one of those men for a lover, and had a relationship with this man. And that is trauma bonding. It is, quite similar to cognitive dissonance as to, let me try to explain this, where when that person is telling you, with a gun, like, hey, you are a victim now, and there is nothing that you can do about it, and you have to do exactly what I say, and when I say that you're a piece of dirt and you don't really need to live anymore, and whatever I say goes, because you are that insignificant, your life is that insignificant. They're putting that is cognitive dissonance, when they are critically putting you down inside of your head and constantly making you feel like you are nothing and you are no good. They can do it in a lot of different ways, even more subtle covert cases, where it might be like you are just conversing in a conversation with somebody at a restaurant or something, like you're sitting across from your abuser, and you don't even realize that they're an abuser, because it's so subtly, the manipulation and the brainwashing of the cognitive is so, sometimes can be so like, almost like they can, the thing about narcissists is they can act so charming and really charm their way and act like, they're really good, nice people, but all of a sudden they say little things under your breath to kind of break that flow, that flow of the conversation that's happening, just like the normal flow of like a normal conversation. All of a sudden they will butt into that and start their little insinuendos, like they might say something under their breath, and you have to kind of cut out of the flow and interrupt you, and you know, things like that, where like also they might like say like little and jokingly, but kind of say something nasty like, you're stupid, or something like that. That is also cognitive dissonance, when they're starting to crack you down and push you down with these insults that hurt you emotionally. These are not normal healthy ways in conversating. And you can notice that with people, even if you're dating or something, that these are red flags of toxic people and narcissism, to mild to more extreme levels. Um, you know, it can start very subtly like that, and when the relationship continues, when it falls into that cycle, of the honeymoon, of course, that when they start criticizing you and making you feel less than, that when you don't even feel like you're even a normal human being anymore, and then that will isolate you further. The thing about cognitive dissonance is that they can, that is another way that they can separate you further from family and friends, and even your own children. Like, you end up even, a victim can end up even throwing their children under the bus, so to speak, because without you even knowing what's happening, because when they start with the little insults and things, those insults grow even further during time, until the point that they're really beating you down in certain ways, and keeping you, their goal is to keep you isolated from your family and friends, and it can be even your own children. That's a big one for me to realize that, because it's just such a vulnerable area for mothers, and to lose sight of reality and really what's going on, especially if you are not educated at all about what is really happening. It can be just so detrimental, this knowledge, because for so many years I did not know what was going on with a few of my relationships. At first in my relationships, I would have my kids with me, and they would end up like hurting one of my children or something, and then of course I would leave that situation and I would leave them, and it got to the point where even I would stay at my parents', not realizing that a person, like the grandparents, can even do that same thing, where they start saying that in a narcissistic parental case, where they can start saying that you're not doing you're not being a good mother, and you always get into these relationships where they're hurting the kids, and like, saying that their place is safer than theirs. That's kind of what happened in my situation. And then being so terrified into getting into another relationship where you become so terrified that that's going to happen again to your children. And, it's such a place of fear and the brainwashing that can occur from all angles of people in your life, because even in situations where there are flying monkeys and enabler type people that are around that narcissistic family, and or that narcissistic type of abusive person, where they talk to you and try to get you to go back with this person, because I will talk about that in a different video. But those are narcissistic terms that I've had to learn as well. And just people that can put you back in this beaten down place with this certain group. It can even happen on the job or whatever. But I'm just saying, in my case, it had a lot to do with my family and my relationships. I know in my last 2 relationships, I couldn't even have my children with me. And that's when the grandparents came into one of them because I was being beaten. I had told my mother that I was being beaten by one of my men, and I had worked an hour away from home, and then I had met my beau an hour away, and so I stayed with him quite often. And like on the weekends, or as often as I could, came and saw my kids, which were still staying with my narcissistic parents. And then it just got to the point, I remember, when after being physically beaten and all different ways of being beaten down by the man that I was living with, then my narc parents came into it and said, well, that's no place for kids to be. And when you are such a beaten down, helpless victim, at the time they looked more like my saviors and like heroes than any kind of manipulators, because they're good actors as well, not knowing how to get out at that time, because that's where they want to keep you. That's where the abuser wants to keep you. They want to keep you isolated and beaten down from all of your friends or family that might be even helpful whatsoever. And so they can just keep doing that cognitive dissonance over and over again. And I just remember back then, my narcissistic father came at me with, well, we think it's a good idea that maybe we just take guardianship of your children. And being the helpless victim that I was, I really felt like I didn't really have a lot of options, and I thought maybe it would be better for them. And so I signed over papers. And I remember even signing over papers with my firstborn daughter to my narcissistic ex, not knowing at the time that he was anything narcissistic. I often felt like he was better than me. He dressed better than me. He had a good, stable job. And, but now that I see that all my exes were narcissistic, in different ways, not all narcissists are crappy motorcycle type people, or just drug addicts or whatever. They can also have money and be very important in their neighborhoods or whatever, and very well respected or whatever. And that's the thing of it all. That also can lead to further cognitive dissonance. It's all about making you feel inferior, making you feel bad about yourself, to the point where they even can go into gaslighting, where they're going to make you feel like you don't have a good enough job, or you know, there's something wrong with you, or you're crazy, or you're nuts, or a lot of different just brainwashing that they're putting into your mind until you actually feel like you are that way and that you're not good enough to even maybe take care of your own kids. It can get that bad. And of course, you know, that's when I started doing a lot of my drinking and drugging again, and would just take these boyfriends that were narcissists, and they were also substance abusers. I remembered the anger and the pain I felt from all sides, you know, feeling, just beginning to feel all alone. And, you know, that's a really hard place when, like, all the friends that I did have just kind of vanished. And I was left isolated, alone, with this man that would beat me. So, you know, it's really sad but true. And to break the denial can take some time. But let me tell you this, it is not your fault. And there is nothing wrong with you. Again, you might have to maybe educate yourself on having more self-esteem, and also just keep educating yourself on the things that narcissist types will do and use to manipulate you. And you know, for me, it's just taken me such a long time to really come to this point, but mostly it's just education, you know. When you are leaving this person, it's a good thing not to let this person know, that abuser know, because a lot of times it will break their very, very shallow, fragile ego that they do have, you know. And they can go into narcissistic rages and try to beat you down even further until you become so helpless that you can't stay. They can even do it with, like, getting you to do more drugs or more alcohol, putting you in unsafe environments where, like, that make you sick. Like, that happened to me when he moved me into a place that was full of toxic mold, still recovering. And they're just not people that you want to mess with. They're not people that you want to live with. They're not people to be around. Their main goal in life, even as good as they make themselves look or sound, they are all the same. They don't want anything good for you. The only way that they want you is if they can have complete power and control over you in very beat down kind of ways. You know, they can go back into that honeymoon for a while when you act like you're going to leave, or when you're acting like you can't take it anymore, you know, and do that for a while and get you addicted to the love bombing that they first gave you, that felt so extremely good and made that peptide addiction in your head just go off like a drug, you know. And then when they go back to the end of the cycle, where it honeymoons again, and then they start saying, oh baby, I'm sorry, I will never be like that again, and how could I make it up to you, and all this stuff, you might get a little of that addiction, great love bombing that they first gave you, just for a little bit, and then the cycle just repeats itself again until you finally leave. There is no way you can fix a narcissist. You know, therapists have already tried. It's just not something that there is not any way that you can help these people, even if they put on the crying victim, you know. It's all a part of their control to get you back and to get you to stay. Okay, so I thought maybe I would put this out there today. I know that even if you are thinking about leaving your narcissist, um, it's best not to start telling them what you are learning about them, like that, because you're learning all these narcissistic things. That is another no-no. I know I've done that before in the past, and it's never really helped. And also, I learned again this morning that it's really important not to do that, because that will just make them beat you down even more. So it's really important to get out, stay out, and just keep out of it. You might have some relapses. You might relapse for quite a while, but I do that too. But all in all, even with the new series I bought by Kim Saeed, says the same thing, that you really need to, when you do leave them, you need to cut off all contact with them if you can, unless, the cases include like child custody and things like that. Just, don't answer that phone, go no contact, block his number, block his texts, because he's going to beat you down on those messages too. So the best thing is to stay away and learn all you can. And it might take a long time. And also, but what's most important is that you start healing from like from that pain from the past, even like begin to heal that stuff from your childhood through meditation, healing meditations, hypnosis, or, a therapist that knows. I mean, a therapist that is well informed on narcissistic domestic abuse. You don't want to get a therapist that does not know much about it, because you're not going to get the help that you need that way. So there's a lot of stuff online. There's a lot of help at domestic abuse survivor meetings in your area, and I just urge you to go. Those are so helpful. And to start connecting with those family and friends again that maybe you've lost connection with in any way. I know that right now I've been really coming back together with my children again. And still trying, just being a good role model for them. And you have to be careful when those kids might still be living in a narcissistic environment, but just to maybe help them more be aware about what's going on. But try not to slam the other side, because that's that kid's heart that you're playing with. And, you just have to be careful in that area. So just give them all the love, and remember what's important: you, your family, and safety. So thank you for listening. Have a beautiful one. Bye.